We just changed his profession. Chief John Carmichael from the Walpole Police Department. And Chief Carmichael has served in the Walpole Police Department since 1996. He was named Chief in July of 2015. His service includes 7 years with the Medfield Police Department and the United States Army Military Police. He holds a master's degree in criminal justice from Curry College. For his master's thesis, John conducted a critical analysis of marijuana decriminalization in the United States. He is supervisor of the Norfolk County Police Anti-Crime Task Force, also known as NORPAC, an active member of the Walpole Coalition for Alcohol and Drug Awareness, and a founding member of the Norfolk District Attorney's Prescription Drug Task Force. Please help me in welcoming Chief John Carmichael.
Good morning. Please hold the Captain Stooping jokes. Y'all remember them, right? I don't typically dress like this when I do presentations, but we're going into Boston for one of our officers who's getting an award today, so we're going to get dressed for the occasion. It's always great to have to present after a doctor, but thank you, Dr. Trencliffe, very well spoken. Last time I was here, today is just going to be mostly a PowerPoint presentation. I'll probably go through it pretty quickly because this stuff, we can talk about it all day long, so at some point we have to cut it off. But last time I was here, I passed out some examples of marijuana products. If you all recall, if you happen to be here for that, but we only got half of it back, and then we lost the attention span, so we couldn't get it. But anyways, I'm going to talk about the impacts of marijuana, basically what we've been seeing in Massachusetts so far. I put that picture up there to start because, you know, for the men in the audience, you all know when your wife gives you the hairy eyeball, right? Well, every time you do presentations in front of some of these groups, that's all you can feel is the daggers, you know, the daggers in your back. But I've been testifying on a lot of different things with the Cannabis Control Commission and the Cannabis Advisory Board. So question 4 is essentially what passed, and if you all recall, it started out with Chapter 334 of the Act of 2016, created 94G, which is the law, the recreational marijuana law, and then this was amended, and this was Chapter 334 and 94G. That was the amendments that the legislature did. So a lot of things actually changed. Not some of it for the better, some of it not so much. I'll explain that. But this law created the Cannabis Control Commission and the Cannabis Advisory Board. And basically, the Cannabis Advisory Board is a 25-member board that makes all of the recommendations to the Cannabis Control Commission. And you're probably wondering why I would do that, because I'm probably one of the biggest people in Massachusetts that was against this, but I look at it like if we're going to do this and it already passed, then I want to be at that table to make sure that certain things get in, and that happened. Not always, but some things got in there that, from a public safety perspective, we wanted to get in. And then, so the Cannabis Control Commission, they're the regulatory body. They're the ones that promulgate the regulations and enforce those regulations. And it also brought in the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. They oversee the hemp program. It created Mass Chapter 128, 116 through 123. They're going to oversee the cultivation, the processing, the manufacturing, the testing, the sales, and everything that has to do with hemp here in Massachusetts. It's weird that this isn't changing here. Does it do that? So my community, 25,000 people in Walpole, pretty small town. Since 2011, we've had 175 overdoses. We've had 32 fatalities. And we've used naloxone 77 times with a police fire bystander. All right. So obviously, we consider those saves. If it was over that, we'd be looking at over 100 fatalities in just the town of Walpole. Now, these reports, I go to these overdoses. I read through the reports thoroughly. We follow up with overdose families or victims when they survive. And I will tell you that what we see over and over and over again is not so much just because somebody hurt their foot and they got addicted to opioids. What we consistently see is early onset substance use that sets them on a trajectory of addiction. They've set up those behaviors and those patterns and habits that they've developed over the years that ultimately led to the overdose. And this is what is very important, I think, in why we legalized this drug, but it's a major factor. Like, it's a major factor because if we increase access and availability to kids and we start seeing onset at young ages increasing, then to me, that's just making this problem a lot worse. So looking at some use rates, Massachusetts, we already have the 8th highest use rates in the country. And obviously Colorado is taking the top seat there. But when you look at states that have legalized or medical marijuana versus states that don't, we all have the highest use rates. The states that decided to do it and the states that don't, they have the lowest. Out in Colorado, you can even break it down to where medical marijuana dispensaries or dispensaries are located. So we have those retail stores in the community that have actually looked at higher use rates in and around those communities that allow it versus the ones that don't. And that's an important factor right now here in Massachusetts because we're all considering whether or not we want to opt out or not. The criminal justice system, we took a beating when question 4 came out, right? Why do most people think we should get rid of marijuana, get rid of prohibition? It was because of the criminal justice system, right? We were arresting everybody and putting them in jail for marijuana. Nothing's further from the truth. I've witnessed it for my entire career. Normally, if somebody was arrested for marijuana offenses, for their first time offense, it was always dismissed at court. If they were underage, it was typically the judge might have them go to a drug treatment class. When we decriminalized it, it also included that mechanism in it, but nobody uses it. So all of the kids who, prior to decriminalization, who went to the criminal justice system and got early intervention no longer get that. They just don't. And when you look at, and this is I put this 2005 because that's pre-decriminalization, right? The criminal justice system for drug treatment referrals for marijuana is 56%. The vast majority of drug treatment episodes in this country starts with the criminal justice system. All right. So early intervention. So what happened, looking at Colorado, what happened out there? Well, why do you think, you can see here, right after 2012, especially for 17 and under, the drug treatment episodes were increasing, right? And then what happened is after they legalized it in 2012, the drug treatment episodes dropped. You would think they would go up, right? Why did they drop? Because the criminal justice system is no longer involved with it. All right, so the kids who were getting that treatment through that system, through the police, the courts, probation, are no longer getting that. So we're talking about kids that are accessing not just marijuana, but these other drugs, become involved with it. That mechanism's gone. So it's up to just public health and to families and that kind of thing to take care of that. Perception of harm, you guys have all seen this slide, right? We've seen this one a million times, very significant. When we tell our kids that this drug is not dangerous, that it's not harmful, there's more likelihood that they're going to initiate to that drug. All right? And you can see there that it's daily use versus perceived risk. That perception of harm, whatever that's lowered, use rates can increase. And that's what my concern is here in Massachusetts. When I just talked about our overdoses, if most of our overdoses are really because they started out using drugs at an early age, and now we're decreasing their perception because we're basically telling the kids that it's okay, I think it's going to have a very bad impact there. These are just some of the trends we've had in Walpole. This is just my community. We have had kids exposed to ziti, cooked in canna butter, cookies with THC, chocolate pretzel with THC, lollipops. We've had all the officers in the room know about marijuana rips, right? Those are when you call the marijuana dealer, they come out and you rob them because they either have money or they have drugs, right? It's still a high-priced commodity out there. We have teenage kids pulling a gun on them because they're ordering marijuana. Shatter, that's a drug that I'm going to get into a little bit. Obviously, the vape pens. Hair straighteners are out there. That is a new trend. that we're going to be seeing here across Massachusetts, and they make what's called, we call it rosin, which is basically what they do is they take a hair straightener and they put marijuana in parchment paper, the flour, and they fold it up and they put it inside of the hair straightener and they heat it up until they extract the oils out, and they call that form rosin. It's THC. It's basically you're extracting the pure THC out of the marijuana plant. Okay, so we're not just smoking weed anymore. We're smoking the actual pure concentrate that's coming out of it. All right, so these are just some of the other products. These are some of the products that I brought last time. They're all of these are just extracted components of the plants. They're in different forms, but they're all basically used the same. People just prefer one over the other. Some of them have higher concentrations of THC, some of them have less. But the one on the right is butter. The one on the left is wax. The one on the bottom is keef, which that's kind of becoming popular here in Massachusetts. Some of the offices have been sending me, they have the presses, so they break up the bud and then they crush it down, they add some other stuff to it, and they make keef. You can actually break a piece of that off, and they can smoke that. And then shatter, which is, that's always a very popular one as well. But these are, you know, when I show these at some of the presentations that we've done, you know, people, they don't realize what they legalize. They don't, you know, you see, you know, we're legalizing marijuana, but they have no idea what this stuff is. And I think, you know, I think we did a very good job of trying to explain that prior to question 4, and even during medical marijuana, but people didn't get it, and we did it anyway. So these are just some of the edibles. While I was on the Cannabis Advisory Board, we talked about stamping. They wanted to stamp every single edible that they manufactured with the words THC on it. And as you can see, this one here, the bottom left, that's actually a stamp. That's a stamped THC candy from Colorado. They stamp all their edibles. Well, what does that mean to a kid? Yeah, if you're 13 and somebody gives you that and says THC on it, I mean, was it somebody's initials? I mean, they don't know what that is. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense. There are other mechanisms in place to make sure that there's warnings and everything. This is another example of some edibles that were taken out of a high school. And the one on the top left are just the Swedish fish. And that one there is just an example of, believe it or not, some of those are real Swedish fish right out of the container, and some of them are infused, that we infuse with marijuana, with THC. And if you can tell, I mean, really, you probably can't tell from back there, but if you look at a couple of those, it looks like there's pepper on it, right? Can you guys see that? That's sometimes, like, for identification purposes, how we might be able to recognize it, because a lot of times when they're extracting the oils, there's other stuff, they filter it out, but there's other stuff that's coming out and is getting infused onto the product, and it's not as clean as, you know, as would be if it was just coming out of a candy package. All right. Oh, one other thing too back there. So serving sizes in Colorado are 10 milligrams. All right, so every edible that they purchase has to be 10 milligrams or below of THC. Right, so that's one serving. Here in Massachusetts, there was enough of us on the Public Safety and Public Health boards to knock that down to 5. So we actually cut it in half. So all the edibles, except for medical marijuana, are going to have a 5 milligram THC amount in it. Right, not percentage, but the serving size. Okay, so. And usually, I know, and I saw in John Chef's book real quick that he was talking about how we didn't put limits. There's no limits on the THC amounts that can go into these products. Basically, they provide a range. Like out in Colorado, they'll say this gummy bear has between 18 and 36% THC. Do you know why they say that? They have no idea. But typically that's about where the range is of the THC that's getting into it. So that's why they do that. Massachusetts, it actually says in the regs that we're supposed to identify the THC. I have no idea how they're going to do that yet, but that'll be interesting to to see what they do. All right, extraction processes. The one on the bottom left, the school resource officer. Any of you guys from West Wakefield here? One of the school resource officers from Wakefield sent me that, and he found it on a student that had a bunch of different marijuana type products on their person, and he sent me that. And does anybody know what that is? That's to extract oils. That's the device used to siphon the oils out of the marijuana plant. And essentially what they do is they attach a tube to that front piece going to the left, and then on the end of that tube, they attach butane gas to it, and they turn the gas on, they run the butane gas through the tube, through the marijuana, and then it goes into that little cup area, and then it just siphons down through that tube, and then they just put a coffee filter there, and the oils come through the coffee filter. And if you want to see a big version of this, essentially that's what we're doing here. This is a police training where we're making shatter. Matty Gutwell from Framingham PD did this test. But essentially you can see the coffee filter, you see the marijuana plant there in the tube, and what you can't see is let's run the butane through, but on the top of that, there's butane gas running through that. It acts as a solvent, comes through the marijuana plant, and on the other end, goes through that filter, and that's basically pure THC that's coming out of the other end of that. That's shatter. So what they'll do is they'll take that, they'll put it in the freezer, and they'll freeze it, and then they'll break it up, and now you have a very high potency marijuana product. The ones on the top left, those were from, anybody from Medfield here? Carol? Medfield had a BHO, or butane honey oil explosion at a home over there, and those were everywhere throughout the house. Those are butane tanks. You can buy those, you can walk into 7-Eleven and buy those right now. And that's what the kids will do. They'll purchase those cans, and then you can extract your own oils. So the difference, does anybody know the difference between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana? It's the sticker. They take that sticker and they slap it on there and it becomes medical. Right? The kid that does that has about as much training as Dr. Turncliffe. But anyways, really, that's the case. I mean, the only difference between medical and recreational was a sticker, because in Massachusetts we have what's called virtual separation. All right, and what that means is cultivation, manufacturing, processing, all of those stages that happen prior to before that product gets on the retail market is all the same. So there's a lot of confusion out there. Well, some towns have medical marijuana and sometimes allowed recreational. Sometimes it have the medical might not have opted out yet of the other stuff, so you're opening yourself up to this virtual separation, where that marijuana that's really supposed to be going to the medical side of things is kind of might be able to be transferred out. Medical still falls under the DPH regs, and DPH will fall under the Cannabis Control Commission, so I don't know what's going to happen yet with it, but essentially it is all the same thing until the point of sale. So at the point of sale, if you're a medical and you're a recreational facility, at that point of sale, that's when they separate it out. Everything else behind that is the same. Right, so that's when they tax it, because medical marijuana is not taxed and recreational has the taxes, so that's the only time they separate it. So under 21, I mentioned that we amended the law, right? The legislature got involved, and two of the biggest things that drove me crazy were, we allow 1 ounce of marijuana, the flower material, or 5 grams of concentrate. Why? Because they're the equivalent. So when I showed you that shatter and we were extracting the oils, it would take about 1 ounce of marijuana and extract all the oils out of that, and you would make about 5 grams of concentrate. So that's the equivalent. That's why they have that. But what they did is the legislature wanted to kind of make everything on the same playing field. So remember we decriminalized marijuana in 2008, and we said anybody, it's an ounce or less of marijuana. Well, now we made it 2 ounces. And so we made it basically across the board. So that, up to that 2nd ounce of marijuana is now decriminalized. So the 1st ounce, you know, even for kids under 21, if they have that 2 ounces or below, it's still a civil offense. So essentially what we did was we added on another ounce on top of it, and we added on another, you know, the 5 grams of concentrate. So then, so we allowed up to 2 ounces. Obviously, anything over that is considered a crime outside of the home, and cultivation equaling 12 plants. One of the funny things about this situation here is that if you see plants, so if your neighbor is growing marijuana plants and it's all in their window and they have it all out displayed in the picture window and it's visible, it's a $300 civil fine. But if you're 18 and you have 12 plants growing in your house, it's a $100 fine. I can't figure that one out yet, but I'll get into that a little bit. So, social host. Granny lived in Colorado, I think, for a little while. Social host, they basically, 94G accepted the social host for alcohol. Did anybody know that? Yeah. So basically, if you're the parents or you're the grandparents of a child and you're on your own property, you can provide marijuana products to that child, just like we can do with alcohol. If a parent wants to give their kid alcohol in their own home, they can do that. Good job, Randy. Okay, so I talked about the hemp program, right? And Attorney John Sheff's in the back. John and I are going to meet with the Cannabis Control Commission and the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources tomorrow. They're the ones that oversee the hemp program. What even, John's like he's like the premier policeman trainer in Massachusetts, and we totally like beating ourselves up about this, but really, they kind of redefined what marijuana is. And essentially anything with 0.3% or less THC in it now is defined as hemp, not marijuana. So these CBD, these gummy bears that you see, we, in Walpole, it was brought to my attention, and I sent our detectives out to 5 places, they came back and 4 of them were selling. And if you see those CBD gummies at the top there, you can't see the price tag on it. It's $9 for 3 gummies. And it's got the cute little teddy bears, and you know, this isn't a marijuana product, this helps reduce stress and relieves anxiety and blah, 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 so on and so forth. And kids are buying it. They're buying it right over the counter. They're walking into a store and they're buying it. You can see down here in the ingredients, it doesn't contain THC, not a marijuana product. Well, that's actually true now in Massachusetts, we believe, but we'll find out when we sit down with the Cannabis Control Commission. And then, you know, that it can contain CBD in it. That's what it is. So when we bought these products, and Detective Songen, who works with me, is here today too, he went around and bought some of this stuff. We brought it back and we field tested it. And as you can see, the field test is there and it contains THC. So we have kids going into stores right now, buying all across Massachusetts, buying this stuff over the counter, and it's not marijuana. So we can't really do a whole lot about it. Now, in order to process hemp, in order to grow it, to cultivate it, to process it, to manufacture it, to sell it, it has to be done under MDR. It has to be tested at various stages under that agency. This stuff is not. It's coming in from other states. So our goal tomorrow is going to try to be to sit down and nail this down and figure out what we can do. But when we're talking about onset, early onset, kids' access and availability to these drugs, they can walk in the store and buy this. And there's nothing we can do about it. So, and you know, you look at the packaging. Is that designed for an adult? Does an adult need to go to 7-Eleven and buy CBD gummies? I don't think so. So distribution of school zone change, they only put this one in there because we just recently dealt with it. Selling or intending to sell private marijuana in schools is obviously a problem, but the school zone doesn't affect Class D anymore, which is the flower, the bud marijuana. However, the extracted oils are Class C, which does still fall under distribution in the school zone. And the reason why I put this picture up here is because, and I think the other offices, unless you guys saw something differently, prior to last year when we legalized marijuana, and maybe a little bit after medical marijuana we started seeing it, but prior to legalizing this drug last year, we didn't see this. Kids typically were not smoking THC oils out of the vape while putting it into a Juul. They weren't. They were smoking that. That joint right there has probably 16% THC in it. That THC, the vape oil on the right, which was taken off of a kid in high school, contains anywhere from 85 to 95% THC. It's pure DHO oil. And as Dr. Turnquist said, that's a different drug. Right? They're not the same thing. That one is much more potent than the other. So gifting, I have a lot of friends out there whenever I talk about gifting. Basically, you know, the law allows people to give away marijuana. You can give away an ounce of marijuana, or you can give away the 5 grams of oils. So what do people do? They started, well, you know, here, I'll sell you a t-shirt, a cheesy t-shirt, for $250, and I'll gift you the ounce of marijuana along with it. No, you can't do that. They can't be, and this is, I fought with some of these guys, you know, over this, but it has to be a 21 to 21 transfer. They have to be over 21. It has to be the 1 ounce of 5 grams, and there can be no remuneration. So there can't be a transaction. We call that a drug deal. Okay? And whether or not they give you $250 worth of lemonade or T-shirts or cover charge or whatever it is, you can't do it. It's not the intent of the law. The intent of gifting was, you know, what we saw in Walpole. Somebody sent us a video of a high school girl giving her dad an ounce of weed for his birthday, and everybody. That's what it was for. So, paraphernalia. Obviously, we deal with this a lot. And Walpole, we try and keep a tight lid on it because you still can't sell paraphernalia to kids under 21, and if they're under 18, it becomes a felony. So we're very on top of that. Detective Songen is always checking on this stuff to make sure that this part doesn't get out of control. They can still, you know, on the medical marijuana and recreational, they can still sell pipes and bongs and all that stuff, but you still can't sell it to kids. All right, so. And it's kind of funny that if you sell a pot pipe, you sell one of those pipes to a kid under 18, it's a felony. But if they can cultivate 12 plants in their home for $100. So the trend in vaping and juuling, is everybody dealing with this? Right, this is a huge, major problem. Not just, it's the nicotine, and as Dr. Turnquist said, nicotine is obviously very addictive, right? Less kids are using cigarettes, but they think that vaping and juuling, whatever device it is that they use or they prefer, they're using that. There are obviously still a lot of side effects to vaping. It was really developed as a cessation thing to get kind of have people wean themselves off of cigarettes, right? But it's had the opposite effect. It's become a big marketing tool and very popular. So, like I said, that case there on the top right is a recent case we just had where they were distributing THC oils in the vape pen to be vaped, right? Other situations where these over here, the pods, These are the jewels down here in the bottom left, and they look like a USB port, right? Something you put into a computer, because that's how you charge them up, that's how they charge. But we stop kids constantly that they'll have one of these and it will be in, they'll have it plugged in, a little device in the car. But the pods, it's like back in the day when, you stopped that person that smoked 10 packs of cigarettes a day and they just threw the butts all over the place, and the cigarette, the ashtray was just overflowing with cigarette butts. The pods are all over the place. They're everywhere, all over the floor, and so these kids are really using this stuff a lot. And as you know, like now that trend has not just turned into nicotine and flavored products, it's turned into BHO. So marijuana and polydrug use, I know this came up a little bit, but medical marijuana, there's a new study that came out, because, if you're a medical marijuana state, you're going to have less overdoses. Well, there's nothing really, I think every link that they show is kind of spurious on that, but medical use of prescription drugs for medical marijuana users was actually higher, significantly higher for people that were using that, and also for non-medical use as well. Has everybody seen that study? It just came out like last week. So this case here, this was another Walpole case, but it just goes to show that, they want us to believe that if people that smoke weed or that are using marijuana products, they'll only do that. All right, and if you look at the OUI data of Colorado and Washington, right, they're certainly not doing that. People are drinking and they're smoking weed, and now they're killing people behind the wheel. So it's getting worse as being an impact, but this is just one case. This is a medical marijuana patient who's growing plants. Oh, but guess what? Along with that, they have oxycodone, and they have heroin, and I think one of the top left one's fentanyl. Well, that's sometimes what we see in law enforcement. Disproportionate impact. So I told you Walpole's 25,000 people, right? So you saw that under this new law they have these different process of social equity, right? So they have, if you come from a community that was disproportionately impacted by the quote war on drugs, you have a better chance of submitting an application with the Cannabis Control Commission and getting into the marijuana industry. All right? I don't know how this happened. I'm still trying to figure out, but guess who's in there? Walpole makes it in there, with Boston, Worcester, Brockton, Randolph, New Bedford. So how did that happen? Did Walpole go after marijuana users any more than Norwood and Canton and everywhere else? I don't think so. So this is actually in the Cannabis Control Commission's reports, and these are areas that are identified as places that were disproportionately impacted. And so these are the communities around Massachusetts, and I think Walpole and Quincy are the only ones in Norfolk County that were added to this list. And so what's important to note is that it's false. People, the way we report our incidents in Walpole might vary from the way they do in other towns, right? So what these things don't do is they don't mention civil, criminal, incidental crimes, right? So if there's certain situations that once in a while you would come across a person that's smoking weed on a street corner, or I'll even give you an example in front of my office. The MBTA bus ends up in front of my old office in Walpole Center, the 34E, and there'd be people smoking marijuana out there. And back before 2008, you could arrest that person, you could charge them with it, right? But there's most of the other times, like usually it was because of something else that happened that triggered that engagement with the marijuana. So might have been a criminal incidental offense. It might have been a domestic, and two people get into a fight, and they're arrested for assault and battery, and then you search them and they have marijuana in their pocket. So they're charged with marijuana, right? Or you pulled them over and their license was suspended, and you arrest them for a license, a civil type of stop, you arrest them for the license being suspended, and they have marijuana, and that's an additional charge on there. So it doesn't differentiate between those things, and you can't do that. You can't just give a blanket approach and say, you know, this is all because of marijuana, because it's not. And I can't even tell you, looking at my data at the police station, what is and what isn't. So how they did this is not really the right way to do it. All right. So this is, we met with Jeff Sessions, just on the federal stance. I don't know where this is going to go yet, but essentially, Attorney Lelling has said that nobody in Massachusetts is going to be immune from marijuana crime prosecution. No, how do we interpret that? We don't know yet, but I would assume that people go way outside of the guidelines, or they're diverting it to other states and that kind of stuff. We might have some intervention with the federal side of things, but we don't know. Oh, and this is just so the war on marijuana. 2004, we had 123,000 arrests, 15,000 little drug arrests, 6,400 were marijuana arrests, which were 5.2% of the total arrests, and 5.2 of the total was from marijuana possession only. So it's not really, you know, everybody wasn't getting arrested for marijuana. Drug driving, this is a few incidents that we had, particular to Walpole. Struck a vehicle head-on, struck a utility pole and cracked a pole on the wrong side of the street. This is just since we legalized it. Driving high and drunk, struck a pedestrian. We had their speed, it hit the pole at 76 miles an hour and just clipped the lady walking her baby on the side of the road. And then the fourth one, driving, struck a bridge abutment, couldn't navigate through the bridge area and just went right into the bridge abutment. Common denominators, they were all under 21. They were all people that we dealt with in the past for marijuana offenses. Diversion, this is the one on the right there is 263 grams of dabs, which is a marijuana concentrate. We took this after a search warrant, after a girl at the Aggie High School ate it, because somebody at school brought it to school and gave it to her. Those dabs came from MCR Labs in Framingham. It was diverted through a marijuana dispensary agent who had a medical marijuana dispensary agent card. She was stealing it from the lab. There was no oversight there. We've changed that based on this case here. And with my promise that I wasn't going to go on Fox and throw them all over the place. But that container right there, and that's all the other stuff that we got, all different kind of products. That 263 grams of dabs is equivalent to 50 ounces of marijuana. Right, the gray market, they're everywhere, right? Duber.com, Craigslist. There's already a gray market that's out there right now that is distributing marijuana. That's why we're against delivery, especially delivery only in Massachusetts, because once we do that, they become part of the black and gray market. They're going to be the ones doing it. 2 minutes. All right. And to show you how we're getting rid of the illicit market, I mean, it's shooting fish in a barrel. It's, you know, that's the Quincy case where that whole truck is just loaded with edibles and different marijuana products. This one here, not everybody's dealing weed, they also deal in cocaine and heroin, and some of the other cases that we've had in Walpole there. That's my girl at my house on the right. I'm getting them up there, they're growing. Cultivation, but 6 to 12 plants, you guys all know about that part, right? 10 ounces yield. The big thing with the illicit market is this, that if you harvest 5 ounces from your 12 plants, all right, that gives you 60 ounces of 3.75 pounds of marijuana, right? If you don't even know what you're doing, you can do that. 60 ounces times $250 an ounce, 15 grand. Not a bad payday. If you could do that 3 times a year. So, you know, $2,500 to $3,000 a pound. BHO lab explosions, those are just some of the incidents we've had here in Massachusetts. People extracting oil using BHO. And that's basketball cop. And they're on a good note. That's it.